We are at a really exciting point in the story here. Really exciting. Because what we're now going to get into, so far, we've been in La La Land for now. We've spoken about this paradisical world where Adam and Eve are just frolicking in the meadows and having a great time and eating from all the fruits of the tree. But now we're going to get into the aspect of the story that really has so much relevance for us because it's the introduction of evil. It's the introduction of the part of the world that makes life complicated and difficult. So we really have to approach the next chunk of text with an eye towards learning what are the strategies of evil. How does it work? What do I have to look out for in my own life? Because whatever happens here, this is the prototype of evil. And not just the evil from without. The most important evil is grappling with the evil from within. So this is the textbook. This is the playbook for how to do that. We had our introduction last time where we said that the introduction of the knowledge of good and evil, the introduction of this thing called the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, means that we no longer see reality as objectively true and false in terms of morality. We now, what's going to happen, the shift that's going to take place, is that we now see the world through subjective eyes. Yeah, but is it good for me? Does it stimulate me? Is it interesting for me? As opposed to, is this the right thing to do or not? And that's going to be the header for this entire next section. Here we are, chapter 3, verse 1. And the snake was the cleverest, the most cunning of all the animals of the field that Hashem Elohim had made. All right. Now, before we get into the conversation here, this is a really interesting introduction to this snake. First of all, there's a lot of discussion about what this snake is. Does the snake actually talk? Did they think it was talking? Is it the Yetzer Hara incarnate, the evil inclination incarnate, or was it a real snake that the Yetzer Hara had kind of infiltrated? We don't know what this thing is, which just lends to the point that we're not talking about a snake. Right? In other words, this has to be understood on the deepest level possible. So why a snake? That's a great question. We can maybe talk about it. Now, it describes him as clever, and the Hebrew word here is arum. And there's something interesting about this word based on what we saw yesterday. Any guesses? Nate?
Arum also means naked.
Arum also means naked. And it is not an accident that immediately preceding this verse, the humans, Adam and Eve, are described as arum, which means naked. So the man and his wife were naked, and now we see that the nachash, the snake, is also arum. Now naked and clever, cunning, are the same word. And in Hebrew, that's also not an accident. And we have to try to figure out, well, what does that mean? But on the simplest level, what it means is that there is some common denominator between humans and this snake. We're not that different. Now what's interesting, this is my theory, and it's just a theory, but the non-Jewish denotation of the text puts a big chapter break in between these two verses. And I think it's in order to make the distinction between the snake and humans. That according to some religious worldviews, animals and humans are like worlds apart. They have nothing in common with each other. But we know from this text that the snake and the humans were very much alike. They had a lot in common. There were a lot in common.
You mean by character?
What?
By character.
By
character?
By character. By character.
I would translate.
Meaning, there's a reason why the humans are called arum, and the snake is called arum right after that. It's possible for them to relate on a certain level, and we'll see what level that could be. Yeah?
I think this is really interesting because a lot of people call the animalistic part of our brain the reptile brain.
Yes, absolutely. This is the reptilian brain, 100%. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Now, it also says he's the most cunning of all the animals that Hashem Elohim had made, which is an interesting addition because who else made them? Which lends itself to another very important point. The introduction of this evil character is not like some independent domain that's going against God's orders. God made this too. And our understanding of whatever that voice is called, the evil inclination, the snake, the forces of evil, it's not some outside force locked in eternal battle with the forces of good in heaven. The evil inclination is also a creation of God, which serves a very important function in the world. It's part of the system. There's no such thing as being outside of the system. There's this wacky character. He's a very interesting guy named Gutman Locks. He's very old now. I don't know if he still does it, but for many, many years, he's a Chabad rabbi who wraps tefillin on people at the wall. But he started off as this Hare Krishna guru who traveled around the country with a lot of followers. Born Jewish, but like a lot of good people in the 70s, just got really swept up in that stuff. Eventually became disillusioned with that whole movement and moved on to being a Christian healer. He would go around the country healing people. I can walk, I can see. And one day he turns to his fellow healers. He wrote this in his autobiography. He turns to his fellow healers and he says, "Let me ask you guys a question. Is God in the heart of the devil?" And they said, "No, the devil's heart is black as sin. There's no God in there." And he said, "You guys are clearly wrong, because God is everything. God's everywhere. There's nowhere that God is not. It's impossible that God cannot also be in the heart of the devil. He must be there as well." So he took his Bible and he ripped off the second half and he says, "From now on, I'm only keeping the first half." Now, he had some interesting views on how you do that, because if you don't have the oral Torah and you just read the Torah on its own, so he read that you're supposed to put fringes on the corners of your garments. So he started putting tassels right here, right, on the corner of your garments. Then he eventually met, an Orthodox rabbi, and he said, let's sit down and learn something, and he became a Chabad Chassid.
Do you know what his book is called?
It's called, you got to look it up. It's either under Gil Locks or Gutman Locks. Okay? Either Gil Locks, Locks, or Gutman Locks. Very interesting story. Very interesting guy. I went to him for a Shabbos meal. He's a fascinating guy. So the point, though, is that we do not see evil as outside the system. It's part of the system. Okay? Now, what does he say? The first thing is, Vayomer Elisha, he says to the woman, Af ki amar. And this is very hard to translate. There's a lot of different translations. Literally, af means even, ki means did or when or is it that, right? Said God said, don't eat from all the trees of the garden. Okay? And he said to the woman, af ki, even did, or even is it, or even when, or something like that, God said, don't eat from all the trees of the garden. So for this, we're going to turn to Rashi. It's going to be under the heading of Af Ki Amar, right? Well, how do they translate that in the Art Scroll?
Did God say?
Did God say? Did God say? Okay? So, take the person next to you. Spend a few minutes going through steps 1, 2, and 3. Tell me what's Rashi's question, what's his answer, and what are the step 3s. Go for it. All right, guys. Let's see what you got. Step 1, Rashi's question. Ooh, I see Samuel and Brandon are just excited to give me an answer.
I guess our first basic question was what exactly did God say?
What did God say? What did God say?
Because it opens up by saying.
Is that Rashi's question?
Is it? Yeah.
Or is that the snake's question? What's Rashi's question in the text? Ethan?
Why did the snake ask Eve this if he already might have known?
It sounds like the opening of a riddle. Why did the snake ask that? Why is... It could be part of Rashi's answer, but I think Rashi's asking from a technical place and then giving that as a deeper answer. Yeah, Joey, back from the
I
dead.
think Rashi's question is why is the snake asking, shall you not eat of any tree in the garden if the snake saw them eating from?
Okay, that's part of the. That's going to be that's going to be part of the answer. But we're starting from a technical question in the text. Yes, Austin.
So Lewis, my partner, he said that the Hebrew is just weird. Like it's kind of like the phrasing of it. And Hebrew is the question itself is asked strangely.
Yeah. So yeah.
And just said that. So Ron was wondering why is it asked strangely?
Okay, I gave you guys a hint when I muddled the translation there. Yeah. So I said af ki can mean lots of things, and at the same time it might mean nothing. Meaning it's a very, very weird, ambiguous phrase. Af ki, meaning the totally literal translation of this text might be even though, even when God said, don't eat from all the trees of the garden, which means that it doesn't even finish the sentence. That might be one of the literal translations. Did God, even when, because ki can mean when, it can mean with, it can mean, right? Even when God said, don't eat from all the trees of the garden, ... which is a very strange thing to say because it doesn't have a second half of the sentence. But in reality, that's really Rashi's question, which is, what does af ki mean? It's so ambiguous. There's so many possible translations of af ki. We're just trying to figure out what that means. What does that word mean, that phrase? So Rashi suggests that the answer is shema, which means perhaps. Perhaps. In other words, the way he's reading it as, even did. Did he even? Is it possible? Right? Maybe he even said not to eat from all of the trees of the garden. It's possible. Is it possible? Yeah? So that's how he's translating. Now, what is his answer in addition to what I just said? He seems to add something as well. He has an afal pi, even though, right? Which I think speaks to Brandon and Joey asking the second part of the question, which is, how could you get away with this? Meaning, we know what God said. How are you expecting somebody to get this wrong? It's clearly not what God said, right? What did God say? He said, eat from all of the trees, but don't eat from that one. And the snake is saying, is it possible that God said, eat from none of the trees? Now that's a ridiculous thing to say. So that would be kind of part two of this question in Rashi. Now that we understand what the word af ki means, that it means perhaps, the suggestion itself is ridiculous. So Rashi's kind of offering his own step three, which is, how could the snake even suggest something that is so far away from what Adam and Eve know to be true?
So this is a part 3 question, right?
That Rashi is kind of giving his own part 3 question.
Because we were thinking, why would the snake misquote Shem?
Right. So Rashi gives an answer, right?
Yeah.
What's his answer?
Like to put words in how did it say? So that she could answer and he would come to speak of the tree.
So he does something really cunning, right? Even though he knew, right? He saw that they were eating. He knew that this was an entirely baseless claim. Nonetheless, he decided to just throw anything at the wall in order that eventually they should come back to the subject of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay? All right. Step 3 questions. Ephraim.
When I read this,
I think about how sometimes like I'll have a thought, oh, what about another cookie, or what about like another drink, or what about another whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It seems like paralleling what for a lot of people, what how the first thought from the Yitzhak can come in.
Okay, there's no question that there's a tremendous amount to learn here. But let's start with questions. Let's start with questions on Rashi. Yeah, Eli?
Okay, my question would be, why is Rashi not addressing that God, and I'm sorry, that the snake asked Chava and not Adam?
Oh, well, that's a very interesting question. The Medrash talks about it, and we can discuss it. Why is the woman the main character in this story? Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there, hopefully. But let's stay local to this Rashi. Ethan?
Why didn't the snake ask her like a more straightforward question if he wanted to get into this?
Okay, so why is this the strategy of the snake? How is this the best way to, for him to achieve his aims? Okay? Yeah, Nate.
Isn't there the concept that we have different interpretations on it, but that basically God gave the command not to eat to the tree to Adam before he was created? So she didn't, she heard it from Adam, so it was secondhand almost.
Yes, we're going to get there because we'll get there in the next Rashi. Okay? Any other questions? Sam? Daniel?
How can the snake talk?
How can the snake talk? Great. So there's a lot of different explanations of this. It ranges. There's a huge range of interpretation. Everything from the snake wasn't actually talking, and meaning the people who want to understand this on a more rational, simple basis say that the snake wasn't talking. But based on its gestures, you could tell what it meant. That's what Adam and Eve could tell. All the way to, yes, it was a talking snake, and that's what was going on. But again, we are putting on our glasses of that blinds us to the simple interpretation of the text, which means that anything we think to be just the obvious, the simple way of learning this is wrong. So yeah, we have to suspend our disbelief here and say we're living on another plane of consciousness when we read this book, when we read this part of the book. Roy?
Why did the snake want to convince Eve to eat from the tree?
All right, so good. I skipped over that Rashi, but we can address that. What's the motive of the snake? What's the motive? Why is he doing this? Because he likes to be evil?
He doesn't want legs.
So we'll see. Okay, we can try to address that as well. All right. I think it's really important here to just try to figure out what's going on. Okay? There's another step 3 question, which is that the only way to interpret this afki phrase? And the answer is no. Right? There are different ways of interpreting it. The first thing that we gain from this Rashi is 2 extremely important strategies, which are really one strategy of that part of us that tries to instill negativity into the way that we see the world. The first one is doubt. The word Shema, perhaps, is always the installation of doubt. Doubt. The beginning of evil is the lack of clarity. And this is a lot deeper than I think that I'm explaining it. The way that we can see this is how Rashi describes what he tries to do. Rashi says that the best way for the snake to be able to confuse the woman is not necessarily to directly tell her lies, but rather to just throw as much as he can at her until eventually something sticks. There is a really interesting book, which unfortunately I can't tell you the name of the title, but using acronyms, the book is called On BS. And it's a really fascinating book. Because the book talks about the difference between lying and BS. And they're two very different things. When a person lies, they're still in the realm of true and false, right? When you're caught lying, you know that there's something called true and false. And so you might be saying the wrong truth. It's not a true truth. But at least you're still claiming to be involved in the category of what's called true and false. BS is something entirely different. BS is no longer caring what the truth is. So I'll give you an example. I'm a toothpaste advertiser. So one way for me to manipulate you is to tell you that this toothpaste will never give you another, make it sure that you'll never have a cavity again. Now that's a lie. My toothpaste doesn't do that. You'll never get a cavity forever. Okay, it's wrong, it's a lie. It might get some people to buy it, but at least I'm still claiming to give you a fact. There was a certain point in history, there's a great book about this called Amusing Ourselves to Death. An amazing, amazing book. There was a certain point in history, he notes, when advertising was no longer interested in the facts of the product. It was interested in other things. He describes this moment when one of the first print ads was just a child smiling over a bowl of cereal. And it had nothing to do with the nutritional value of the cereal. It had nothing to do with the taste of the it was all fluff. It was all nothing. The greatest impediment to our discovering truth today is not necessarily that we live in a world of lies, but we live in a world that couldn't care less about finding the truth. Everything else is important. So you search up a question on Google and it will give you 5 million answers. And that's the best way to hide the truth, is not to lie to you, but to just throw as much as it can to get you to not be interested in the truth anymore. And that's the installation of doubt. It's so cloudy. It's so, I'm wandering through such a maze that I almost forget what I was here to do. Okay? And now you're going to see what happens. You're going to see what happens when the snake throws this curveball. I don't know, maybe, who knows? Maybe he said nothing, maybe he said everything. I don't know, maybe everything's an illusion. Who knows? Like, maybe nothing is real. So now let's see what the woman's response is. Before we do that, let's just address some of the elephants in the room. Someone asked, what was the snake's motive? That's a really good question. Rashi previously, in the first Rashi on verse 1, if you want to read this in your own time, it says, what's the transition here from when the man and the woman were naked together until now we're introduced to the snake? What is that segue? And Rashi says it's to tell you that the reason why the snake approached Eve is because he saw them having relations. And he desired her. And he desired her. Yes. Now what does that mean? What does it mean? Remember, everything is on a deeper level. So what that really means is that evil approaches that which has the potential for completeness. So this is a really deep idea, and we don't really have enough time to get into it that deeply. But this is such an important idea. Anytime you begin a project and you have a goal in mind, and there's now a vacuum, there's an empty space between you and fulfilling that goal, or anytime you have an urge, and every time you have a desire to want to be whole or complete or feel better, that's the moment when evil swoops in and says, well, let me offer you a way that you can achieve that completion and that sense of wholeness. When something is incomplete, when something has no desire to want to be whole or to want to be complete, then evil has no footing. There's no place there for us to get confused or to get sidetracked. In other words, we have to want to desire something good, and that's when evil feeds off of that. I'm being really cryptic here, and it's really hard to... Yeah, Brandon?
You said very well at the beginning. What was on evil approaches?
Evil approaches something that has the potential for wholeness, not something that has no potential for wholeness. And the reason, there's very deep reasons why, but the simple answer is, it would be like this, okay? As a human being, I desire to want to be really fulfilled in my life. It's the desire for true and good fulfillment, which is what allows some part of me to say, you know how you could be really fulfilled? Is if you ignore all of your close relationships and instead spend all of your time becoming a bodybuilder. Or if you spend all of your time trying to make as much money as humanly possible, that's really going to fulfill you. Somebody who has no aspirations for fulfillment will never be tempted to do the opposite. That's what I mean. So at the moment where Adam and Eve come together and become one flesh, they become this moment of completion. And then obviously they separate. So now swoops in and says, well, now you've tasted that taste of wholeness. I could offer you a solution where you could feel that again. You could feel that even more. Do you understand what I'm saying? Kind of? Yes? No? The idea is, it's a deep one. I haven't thought about it enough to be able to put it into really clear words. What was the quote? It says, you only really know something if you can explain it if you can teach it to someone else. So my apologies, that's my lack. But the best way I know how to explain it is, if there's no drive to completion, there's no potential for evil. Because evil is the counterfeit to true fulfillment. That's what it is. That's what it's offering. And everything that we chase is simply us having this really good desire that we really actually want to do the right thing, but there's some tempting alternative that says you could actually really be happy through this and not that. So you want to have a deep, meaningful relationship? Yeah, but you could really have the same fulfillment just by having one-night stands. You want to have real, you want to do something really meaningful in the world? Actually, well, you could just do that by likes and followers on Instagram. And that'll give you the feeling of being important, even though you're not doing anything important at all. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. But it's only because you had that healthy drive in the first place that the negative drive is able to sway you. So the fact that Adam and Eve had this sense of completion, this moment of, I see what it's like to be whole, to be real, to be fulfilled in my life, that's when the snake comes in and says, let me show you an alternative. Okay, that's why the snake is approaching. And that's what the snake's job is. Evil desires good because evil feeds off of good. And the reason why is because evil is an illusion, it's not real. But the potential for good is what allows evil to exist. It's a very deep idea, and I'll leave you to chew on that.
So if there's no potential, there's no evil.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And in addition, if you're already fulfilled, it's extremely difficult for a person to be tempted towards evil. If you're really meaningfully fulfilled, the people who are loving life are not the ones who are getting caught up in a cult or you name the vice. It's like, you want to come gamble with me all weekend? It's like, no, I have a great life. I really don't. I just don't need that. I just don't need it. Why is the woman the main character? Daniel, did you have a question about what we were just talking about?
Yeah, just
yeah.
You said evil isn't real, but then earlier you were saying evil is part of the system. So
yeah.
those two kind of go together.
What I mean is that evil has no independent existence. It can't exist unless it feeds off of good. The potential for good is what gives evil its energy.
Ultimately, it comes from good.
Well, everything comes from good. But what I mean is that evil is misdirected good. Remember, I said, we spoke about the root of the word evil means ra, means broken off. It means that if good is the full picture, the real wholeness, the ability to look at everything as coming from one source, I would never be evil to you, ever. If I saw you as just a finger, we're two fingers on the same hand. How could I, the Talmud says, if one hand accidentally hits the other, would the other one take revenge on the first? It's a ridiculous thing to say. If we live that way, if I truly see the nature of all reality, and I see that everything is connected, I can never be evil to you, I can never be evil to myself, I can never be evil to God. The evil begins when it's possible for me to see that big picture, and I can see a fragment of that big picture, and say, well, I'm real, and I'm important. And you know what? Maybe I'm so important that it's worth it for me to step on you to achieve my goals.
So it's an illusion.
Well, it's okay. Is it an illusion? Yes and no. We live in a world where evil feels very real. And the Talmud has some very serious words for people who don't cry at a funeral. Who don't cry at a funeral. For someone to say, oh, it's okay, evil's all an illusion and everything's for the best and I'll never, and why, that's not living with the reality of evil down here. It is real. But on the other hand, if you're looking from God's point of view, there's no such thing as evil. So,
what is this? I don't get that. I don't get that.
Guys, we are getting too deep in this session here. Yeah, Ellie?
Yeah, no, just a quick question.
How
did you phrase that when you said that it's a spark, or that you see a completeness, or how did you say it? Illusion?
Yeah, the potential for completion is what allows evil to feed off of that and misdirect it. You can't have a broken off picture, fragment of the whole, unless you have a whole, right? To be a really evil person, you have to believe in the power of a human being. You have to believe in a lot of good things which you've now skewed in your distorted brain in order for it to be really evil. Yeah?
So you're supposed to cry at a funeral?
Absolutely. Death is sad. The separation of loved ones is a very sad thing.
Yeah, but you can also, I don't want to get off a tangent, but it's also like, you can also think of it as, you're going to like a...
It's a necessary part of life. You can feel the emotional sadness and the pain of that moment and still know that it's a necessary part of life. Okay. Let's move on, because there's a lot to talk about. Why is the woman the main character in this story?
Because the snake was jealous. You said it.
Okay, but who says the snake has to be masculine?
Maybe the snake is bi.
That's my point. Is that what does it mean, guys? What does this mean? So the first thing that I want to point out is that I think a lot of people have maligned, have painted this story in a very negative light and said, oh, you see how the Torah blames women for everything. But the first thing that you have to notice is the woman's the main character in this story, which means that it's her battle. Now, ultimately, she loses the battle, but it's her decision. It's her choice that she's making. So you can look at it two ways. You can either say, well, women are the cause of all the problems in the world. Or you could say, if you were really living in a chauvinist perspective, you would say women should have no place in the decision-making of important things. When in reality, the Torah places the woman front and center and says, this is your fight. This is your fight. Okay? Now, human beings ultimately lose the battle. Human beings lost the battle. We did. And there's a lot to say about that. But it's important to think about it that way. that we do not, we have, rather than marginalizing women, we've placed them front and center and said that they are actors in this story. Yeah?
I heard an interpretation that girls in general are more mature than men or boys.
Okay.
And that's why she was tested instead of
Because she's more mature. Okay. So there's a lot to say. Ultimately, especially when we're talking about Adam and Eve, which are like the archetypes of humans, right? These are like the proto-humans. These are like the metaphors for all of humanity. So here, we can think of them as very representational figures of masculine and feminine. And the masculine and the feminine have two different roles, and they have two different strengths and two different weaknesses. Now, one of the strengths of the masculine is clarity, the ability to be linear in one's thought, and be able to bring things down directly, right? In Kabbalistic language, they describe the masculine as a line and the feminine as a circle. And the reason why is because men are, if you ever read the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, this is the common conversation that a man and a woman will have. The woman comes home, she says, oh, I've had the worst day at school, at work. And he says, oh, wow, why? Tell me, what was so bad? Oh, Barbara at work, she was just so vicious and so mean, in the staff meeting. Oh, that's terrible. Yeah, she was trying to score points off of me and make me look bad. Gosh, we should tell your boss about it. And she's like, no, you don't understand. She was like really digging into me and getting into my personal life. Oh my gosh, we should get a petition going around the office and make sure we get Barbara fired. She's like, no, you're not listening to me. Yes, I am listening to you. I heard every single word you said. She's like, no, you just don't understand. Okay? Now, that's the typical male-female conversation. And the reason why Jonathan Gray, is that his name? I can't remember his name. But Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. He says that the man and the woman are approaching the conversation with two different aims. The man wants to solve problems. The woman wants to empathize. I just need your empathy. I just want to feel heard. That's all I want. I don't want you to offer me solutions. So the masculine energy is very clear and very linear and very goal-oriented.
So what do they want us to do?
The feminine is to empathize. Now, ultimately, what you want to do is you want to take the line and the circle and turn it into a spiral and combine the two, which means a great book that describes this, I highly recommend. John Gottman is a master of all things relationships. He has a fantastic book called How to Raise an Emotionally Intelligent Child. Even before you have children, it's worthwhile reading it. Because he talks about how not to and how to resolve children's issues. A child comes home and says, my best friend was mean to me in the schoolyard. Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. Here, have a candy. Well, that's just distraction, right? Option number 2 is say, oh, grow up. It's not a big deal. Well, that's not validating their feelings. It feels very bad, right? Option number 3 would be like, oh no, I'm so sorry. Let's sit here and cry about it. Yeah, I'm here with you. I'm just be here. And then the conversation ends. They're like, great, well, we cried, but okay. But she's going to keep bullying me tomorrow. So his solution is, number 1, empathize, help them label their feelings. And then after that, after they feel heard, then you offer solutions. Which is what takes the circle and the line and puts them together. So that's ultimately what we want to do. So the masculine is very good at getting to a goal, but very difficult to be present, to hear and to listen and just remain in the emotional space. The woman, very good. The feminine, because again, we're talking about, these are bell curves here. The average man and the average woman does not describe every man and every woman. But in general, these are the tendencies. The feminine energy is very good at empathizing, at remaining in the moment, at being able to engage in conversation, right? To be able to validate what it is that you're saying, but can sometimes lose track of the goal. We can be sitting here and talking and empathizing and saying how hard everything is for a long, long time before we get to, okay, but what do we do now? So this is the unique struggle of the feminine element of humanity, which is I can sometimes get lost in the woods because I'm so busy in the conversation that I've forgotten, wait a minute, you're evil. This is totally wrong. This is totally wrong. I have no patience for you. Yeah.
So, I'm still a little confused. Like, how are you supposed to sympathize with someone and not offer solutions? Or
You do both, but you have to, they must first feel heard, and then once they feel heard and empathized with and validated, then they're ready to listen to solutions. Everyone wants to figure out a solution, right? But that's not the beginning.
It's a commentator's negotiation tactic to empathize first and then...
Very good. All right, now, with 7 minutes left, let's see the response, okay? It says, then the woman said to the snake, from the fruit of the trees of the garden we shall eat. From the fruit of the trees of the garden we shall eat. And from the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, said Elohim, that you will not eat from it, and you will not touch it, lest you die. Checkmate. Anyone here a chess whiz? There's a name for checkmate in 3 moves. This is it. The game's already lost. You just don't know it yet. Okay? So, what did the woman say? She said, we can eat from the other trees. We can eat from the trees. She didn't say all of them. So, number one, she has already downplayed what she's allowed to do. She didn't say all of them. Because God said you can eat from all of them, just don't eat from that one. And from the tree that's in the middle of the garden, that middle one, the one that's right at the center of everything, that's all roads lead to that tree, Elohim said, don't eat from it. Now, by the way, remember we've been using 2 names for God? What is it? What does Yud, Hey, and Vav and Hey mean? It means mercy, compassion, I love you. That's the divine that we have the relationship with. And what does Elohim mean? Judgment, justice, a world of nature and boundaries, right? So the snake, which is an animal, right, which lives in the earthly realm, that's how the snake knows God. The snake knows God as Elohim. The snake doesn't have a relationship with the divine. There's no compassion in the state of nature. So he uses Elohim. Guess what she uses back? Elohim. So now he's changed her paradigm. How do we view God? As a rule-giving, natural force of ruthless judgment.
But why would we expect her to use the other name of God?
Because that's the name that Hashem Elohim has been used in the entire last chapter when he's formed human beings. Okay. So now we've... What? The combination, Hashem Elohim. Of course there's judgment, there's a mitzvah, there's a commandment, you got to follow the commandment. But it's because I love you. It's because I'm looking out for you. Okay. Now, she says, God said, don't eat from it. So far, so good. And don't touch it, lest you die. So, Rashi says, she added on to the commandment. You guys see this Rashi? It's the first Rashi in verse 3. She added on to the commandment. Therefore, she ended up detracting from it. Because there's a mitzvah in the Torah that says don't add on to God's words. Don't add on. Don't make up your own mitzvahs. There's enough mitzvahs, guys. Okay. Really quickly, I think the simple question in Rashi is, where'd that come from? Where'd that come from? We've never seen that before. That's not what God said. So where'd it come from? So the answer is, she added on. She added on. She wanted to be really, really frum.
She had to do touching.
Now, why did she add on? So there's a lot to say here. Nate, you said this? That there is a medrash that says that Adam taught her wrong. He told her more than what he was told. Yeah, which means that ultimately it was his fault. But I want to go something even simpler here. This is the most incredible act of judo that you've ever seen. What did the snake do to engage her in conversation? What? He added on. He threw as much as he could. What happens? He pushes her. So what does she do when you're off balance? You push back, and now you're way off balance. That's what you do. You push someone, and they push back so that they're off balance. This is exactly what the snake did. The snake said, let me just throw you something that's so out of left field, that's so way beyond what anybody would consider to be truth. And you will push so hard back to defend and to turn back and say, no, we can eat it. No, there's that one, we can't even touch it, that one, we're going to die. And now all of a sudden the snake has her exactly where he wants her. Because now that the woman has added on to something and went above and beyond what's true, he's now going to catch her in what's wrong with what she just said. And he's going to say, but that's not true. So he's touch it. Go ahead, touch it. So you see, just as a general tactic of evil, is that the only thing that you have to do here is you start engaging in conversation. And if you say something that puts you on the defensive, you're going to end up compensating for that the other way around. And at that point, when you're off balance, that's when we start to make mistakes. It's incredible what we learn about ourselves from this story. This is the most important story about humankind ever written. This is what humankind is. This is what we are. This is what we are as humans. And you'll see it even more as we see the consequences of eating from this tree and what that represents and everything that comes as a result of that. This is the battle we have all the time with our inner minds. And we see it so much that when a person is not feeling so confident in themselves, that's the moment when you want to overcompensate.
When you want to what?
When you want to overcompensate. You know, you're feeling a little bit sluggish. So you're like, oh, that's it. I'm so lazy. And you know what? From now on, never going to waste another second. I'm going to do everything super efficient. And you know what happens? 5 days later, 2 weeks later, whatever it is, you've now spent 7 hours on YouTube just scrolling because you thought that you could just change everything in like a day. That's the moment when we are the most vulnerable, is when we push back so hard that we're totally out of balance. I don't know, I find that about myself. I don't know if you guys find the same. But when I try to change too much and when I try to go against all of those urges all at once and try to fix everything, that's when I fall the hardest. You know, no sugar, that's it. No more sugar. Anyone ever tried that? You know how hard that is?
I did 6 weeks without chocolate and it was so difficult.
So again, and this is, by the way, this is so important when we're thinking about, you know, I hope everybody this is a place of growth. This is like Garden of Eden, like 2.0, Machon Yaakov. This is the place of cultivating yourself and learning what it means to slowly nourish, to water something every day, a little bit at a time. And I hope, and you know, there's a reason why there's a gym here, and there's a reason why I was never in better shape than when I was in yeshiva, because I was in such a good routine, because this is a place that you want to feel better about yourself and you want to develop yourself in every aspect. And I hope that everybody has an eye towards saying that, like, you know, how can I be 1% better today? 1% is enough. Compound interest, man, changes a lot. If you do 1% over a few years, you have changed a lot. Take something really, really small. You know, and there was a time, I think I try to give myself 30-day challenges sometimes. And, you know, between Pesach and Shavuot, 50 days is a really good time to kind of work on something. So during that, there was one year where I was like, okay, I'm eating a lot of snacks, a lot of junk food. So I'm going to limit myself to like once a day. I'll have a cookie or two, or it's not even saying one cookie, but maybe I'll have 2 cookies, but only in one sitting. In one sitting, I can have that's my snack food for the day, but that's it, right? So that for me, that was a realizable goal. That was something I could do. But if I had said no more junk food for 50 days, it's like whack-a-mole. If you try to push it down here, it's going to pop up somewhere else. All right. These are the strategies, guys. These are the strategies. This is something we can never. Evil will be by your side. It will be inside of you all the time. It will be there all the time. Something tempting you, something telling you you can achieve fulfillment in an easier way, in a better way, and this is really what God wants, whatever it is. It's not learning how to crush it. It's not learning how to repress it or destroy it. It's learning how to live with it and learning how to constantly make yourself more flexible and anticipate more. I know this is what's going to happen. I can anticipate and I can parry. I can move out of the way in time. I can be just nimble enough that I know when it does come, because it will always come, I know how to defend myself.
Huzzah.
Go get him.